Hello there, my name is Kujay, and welcome to my first ever YouTube video. I've been streaming over on Twitch for about 4 years now, and I decided that the time was right to finally enter the YouTube scene. I've had this idea floating around in my head for a video series for quite a long time, and it's a pretty simple premise. Let's take a look at all the different aspects of game design within Destiny 2 and have an open discussion about how we can make things better for the players. In the first installment in this video series, I wanted to take a look at an aspect of Destiny 2 that I think most everyone, PvE and PvP players alike, can agree is not in a good state, especially compared to its counterpart in Destiny 1. I am talking about Vanguard strikes. In this video, I will be covering the status of Vanguard strikes as they are today. Then, we will take a look at what made the Destiny 1 strike playlist the beloved activity that we think of to this day. Following this, we will examine how strikes got to this point in Destiny 2, all the way from launch through to Beyond Light. We will then cover short-term solutions to make the D2 strike playlist better within the coming seasons, and finally, discuss longer-term solutions that would be most ideal for the mode. Alright, let's take a look at Vanguard strikes in Destiny 2 as they are today. Currently, Vanguard strikes serve two primary weekly purposes. The first is to complete 3 strikes for a pinnacle power reward. The second, complete 2 weekly bounties for 100 bright dust apiece. Now, on the surface, these may seem like fine goals, but considering that the pinnacle power reward is a mere +1 pinnacle as opposed to raids and trials, and the other sources typically granting +2 pinnacles, as well as the fact that weekly bounties used to give 200 bright dust apiece before Beyond Light, really just slaps the player in the face. Beyond these weekly go-dos, there is next to no reason to grind out strikes at all. For starters, there are no unique rewards from playlist strikes except for Xenoclast. And to be fair, Xenoclast is a fantastic gun with a large number of unique random rolls. The issue is that it's just one gun. One gun in strikes per yearly expansion is nowhere near enough. Secondly, Vanguard tokens give world loot pool drops, making strikes have no more reason to be played than Crucible or Gambit, our other core playlist, or heck, even Patrol. Furthermore, stale, years-old modifiers that don't adequately shake up the mode make the moment-to-moment gameplay in strikes utterly boring and played out. And finally, with very few new strikes added to the game since Forsaken, combined with the removal of many strikes into the Destiny content vault with the launch of Beyond Light, this has left the playlist feeling quite dull and left behind. With the current status of Destiny 2 strikes outlined, let's take a look back towards the design of the Destiny 1 strike playlist and examine what made this iteration of Zavala's favorite pastime so much better. In particular, Siva heroic strikes in year 3 were the high point, due to a number of factors. First off, nearly every strike had loot that was specific and unique to it, and this unique reward could be looted in the strike playlist or in the weekly Nightfall strike. Who can forget standout weapons such as Treads Upon Stars, Imago Loop, Baron's Ambition, Does Not Bow, Darkblade Spite, Grasp of Malik, even Stolen Will, and Devil's Dawn, not to mention some of the coolest enemy faction-themed armor the franchise has ever seen. Hunters could sport any of the 3 Scion Flayer mantles, roleplay as a mighty mongrel ogre, or even take up the cloak of our old friend Tannix. And come on, Bungie, how can you bring back Tannix as a final raid boss in D2 and not give us back his cloak? Titans, meanwhile, had the pinnacle of meme armor with the Cabal gauntlets, Maulers, which hilariously would block your entire field of view at times while trying to hipfire weapons like the Last Word. Warlocks had slightly less options for enemy-themed armor, but who could pass up the tentacle fantasy of Theosin Vibrus, or turning yourself into a heavy shank with Devouring Maw? In addition to this strike-specific loot, we also had 3 of coins, which, to be fair, everyone used all the time. But what this meant is that there was anticipation at the end of any given strike that you could get an exotic. Compare that to the end of Destiny 2 strikes, where most people are dreading how many trash blues that they're going to have to delete and if they're going to lose postmaster space. Furthermore, gameplay modifiers were more varied than in Destiny 2 and had a massive impact on how you played the Strike playlist week to week. In Destiny 1, we had burns as opposed to singes that let players do 3x damage with a given element of the week while taking 2x damage from that same elemental source. This actively incentivized you to change up your weapons each week and made more of your loot matter. In Destiny 2, we have wimpy singes that grant a 25% damage increase both outgoing and taken, which is such a small modifier that most players just actively ignore it. Furthermore, Destiny 1 had more specific but potent modifiers that incentivized individual weapon slots and our abilities. Modifiers like small arms turned your primary weapon into a bootleg heavy weapon. Specialist turned your fourth horseman into a one-man Death Star. Daybreak made you truly feel like the Traveler's Chosen with insane ability spam, and modifiers like Airborne really incentivize taking advantage of Destiny's extremely fun movement systems to their max potential. And best of all, each week in the Strike playlist combined multiple modifiers together, leading to some weeks with utterly insane combinations. My favorite example was stacking Arc Burn, Airborne, Brawler with the exotic boots Peregrine Greaves. Your shoulder charge on Titan would do an insane 24x damage and allowed you to one-shot spider tanks. It was ridiculous when the stars aligned and you could pull off these crazy build-specific feats, but it was a huge part of what made strikes in D1 feel infinitely more replayable. We also had additional reward sources, like faction reputation, stacked on top of normal strike rewards, making each strike feel like true loot progression. Now, a bit of a hot take here. I personally think that the token-based reputation system that is present in D2 is much better on paper, due simply to the fact that it is reputation that you can redeem whenever you want and on whatever character you want. The issue is the loot in D2 is just so stingy and uninspired for strikes. Finally, there was also strike scoring in both the Nightfall and the match-made Siva Heroic Strike playlist. While scoring usually did not contribute directly to loot, it did make the mode have a more arcade-style feel, as you just made that score number go higher and higher. However, there was one very potent reward available for engaging high-score runs, that being the fabled exotic sniper rifle Icebreaker. So just overall, Destiny 1 Strikes had a much more complete identity, from fantastic exclusive loot, anticipation of an exotic on any given strike, gameplay modifiers that massively shook up the mode week to week, additional passive reward sources, and a fun arcade-style point system that highlights what Destiny does best: popping alien skulls with your buddies. Strikes in D2 have had a rough history that has taken us to their current stale existence and beyond light. At D2 launch, strikes could drop loot unique to the Strike playlist as a whole. We had standout guns like Nightshade and Main Ingredient, which both ripped up the beta way back when. We had workhorse favorites like Origin Story and Nameless Midnight, and it even included a part of the launch raid meta in Curtain Call, which was shoved up Callus's butt for months on end. But the issue was that all these guns, as well as the rest of the weapons in the game at D2 launch, had static rolls, which meant that once you acquired each of these weapons a single time, you were done. There was nothing more to chase or engage with in the Strike playlist. In the following DLCs, new weapons were added to the Vanguard loot pool at the very least. In Curse of Osiris, we had 4 new weapons added to the pool, the standouts among them being the Scout Rifle, Eternal Blazon, and the Auto Rifle, Positive Outlook. In Warmind, an additional 4 new weapons were added, chief among them the 180 RPM hand cannon, Service Revolver. When the second year of Destiny 2 arrived, Forsaken updated many of our Year 1 Vanguard weapons with random rolls, as well as delivering 3 brand new weapons: Long Shadow, Toil and Trouble, and Outrageous Fortune. Up through Forsaken, Strikes used to receive a fair amount of new loot each season, but that began to change for the worse in the seasons following. Meanwhile, during the tumultuous period of D2's first year, Strike-specific loot was eventually added back to the franchise in Curse of Osiris, but only to Nightfalls. This was accompanied by the return of Strike scoring, but again, also only to Nightfalls. The Nightfall-specific weapons, at least, were extremely good, with standouts such as Silicon Neuroma, Duty Bound, DFA, and the Braytech Osprey. The final wave of Nightfall-specific loot was added back in Forsaken, with the unique double-shot aggressive hand cannon Warden's Law, the only legendary kinetic grenade launcher in the game at the time, Malicious Birthright, the only rapid-fire frame pulse rifle in the game during Forsaken, the Horror's Least, as well as the shotgun Mindbender's Ambition, which went on to be a staple of the PvP meta for years. And finally, we were given the sniper rifle, the Long Goodbye, which was a preview of monster snipers to come to the game later, like Beloved and Revoker. Now, these Nightfall-specific weapons were accompanied by the arrival of a number of new strikes to the game, including Warden of Nothing, Hollowed Lair, the Corrupted, as well as Broodhold, which I know was a PlayStation exclusive at first, but it was added to the game as a whole down the road. We also got a new Vanguard armor set for each class at Forsaken launch. However, come Shadowkeep, only 2 new strikes were added to the game, Scarlet Keep and Festering Core. Items that could have been unique to Scarlet Keep were in the game, but instead of being found in the strike, were instead in the Eververse, a ship and a sparrow. And the Festering Core got nothing, and was then promptly put into the Destiny content vault just 1 year later, leading many people to forget that it ever actually existed. As a further blow to strikes, there were 0 new weapons or armor added to the General Strikes playlist in Shadowkeep, with many players wondering if we would ever see a true vendor refresh for the core modes of the game again. At this time, strikes became a part of the free-to-play offering of Destiny 2 with the advent of New Light when Shadowkeep launched. This was the beginning of the diminished level of design effort put towards strikes that we are all feeling the consequences of today. But the true gut punch came in Season of Arrivals, when strikes, along with Crucible and Gambit, had their unique loot pool replaced with the updated world loot pool, removing any unique loot to be had and almost killing off the loot incentive to play strikes overnight. Why bother playing strikes when I can just play Chuck E. Cheese Simulator with Banshee, or get the same rewards from killing dregs out on patrol? And finally, in Beyond Light, strikes received minimal attention. In fact, you could say they received negative content, with so many strikes being pulled out of the game and into the DCV, with only 1 new strike, Glassway, and 1 reprise strike, the Disgraced, aka Omnigul from Destiny 1, added to the game, neither with unique loot, and the exact same world loot pool serving as the basis for strike rewards. We've talked a lot about what made the Destiny 1 Strike playlist so good and what has gone wrong with strikes in Destiny 2. While the strike system needs a lot of love and improvements, there are some things that can be done in the short term. Think by either Season 13 or even Season 14's launch. These will be ideas that seek to maximize player benefit while also looking to minimize the amount of work of the developers. For starters, on the Nightfall side of the game, any strike left in the current game with a unique Nightfall reward should have that reward be updated with a new max power cap, and in the case of the D2 Year 1 static rolled Nightfall weapons, be given random rolls. For the Forsaken Nightfall weapons, which already have random rolls, we should update their random roll perk pools. This would serve 2 purposes. 1, we can add new perks that have been added to the game since the inception of these guns. Perks like Surplus, Killing Wind, 1-2 Punch, Elemental Capacitor, to make these feel like new guns worthy of our time spent chasing them. And 2, this would allow Bungie to balance these weapons on a yearly cadence, removing perks that are deemed to be too strong, like Quick Draw on Mindbenders. Then, with each new fall expansion, Bungie can reissue these Nightfall weapons with new perk pools and an updated power cap, giving Nightfalls a partial refresh every year while minimizing the work for the developers. At the same time, we can also juggle some of our existing Nightfall weapons without a home to our existing Nightfalls still in the game that have currently no unique reward. What if we moved Silicon Neuroma to the Glassway Strike and gave it random rolls and an updated power cap? We have the Arms Dealer, which currently gives a Sparrow. Why not remove the Sparrow and replace it with DFA with random rolls and an updated power cap? We can move Duty Bound into the Scarlet Keep, giving players a potent kinetic 600 RPM auto that can be farmed outside of Iron Banner. We could even slip Braytech Osprey into the Broodhold Strike, which currently has no unique loot, simply trading 1 Hive Strike or another. And finally, and this one kills me that it hasn't happened already, with the return of Omnigul, we could have Grasp of Malak return from Destiny 1, and it would be a hotly desired gun as the only 540 RPM pulse rifle in the game that is not already sunset. Now, shifting gears towards the general Strike playlist, we also need to revitalize the moment-to-moment gameplay there. Currently, we only have 6 modifiers for the General Strike playlist, which is nowhere near enough and leads to a very limited number of combinations. It turns out that there are actually a number of forgotten modifiers from Mercury Heroic Adventures that could be added to the Strike playlist to freshen it up. Some of these were depowered, where kinetic and energy weapons did more damage and more precision damage, but at the cost of reduced grenade damage. You had ones like Elite Soldier. Power weapons and kinetic weapons deal more damage and reload faster, but your supercharge is slower. You have Elementalist, which is reminiscent back to Destiny 1's Specialist, where energy weapon damage is increased, grenades deal more damage and recharge faster, but your melee damage is decreased as a downside. There are also some really unique ones like Justice from Above, where you got increased jump velocity and airborne acceleration, really incentivizing Destiny's movement systems. Your super also recharges faster and deals more damage, reminiscent of D1's Daybreak. However, your melee charges slower and deals less damage as a drawback. And finally, they also had From the Shadows, where your running and crouch speed was increased, your melee recharged faster and dealt more damage, but in exchange for your grenades charging slower. If you combine these fairly unique modifiers with the modifiers currently found in the D2 Strike playlist, you could start to get some insane combos like the Arc Burn, Airborne, Brawler, and Peregrine Greave combo we discussed earlier from Destiny 1. This would help just the general gameplay be a lot more fun. Now, for the loot incentive side of General Strikes, there is a couple of reforms that we could do. First, we could have Zavala be updated to include a selection of the world loot pool available to be purchased from him for Vanguard tokens, say at 50 per pop, and every time you buy one, it would have a new random roll. Now, this would allow for some degree of Strike-specific loot for the General Strike playlist, as you could grind strikes to have a clear-cut path to earn rolls on Zavala's selection of guns. Think of guns like Main Ingredient, Toil and Trouble, Last Dance, Outrageous Fortune, Long Shadow, and the other old Vanguard weapons would all be back with Zavala, able to buy direct with random rolls every time you buy a new one. Also, think about standout PV meta weapons like First and Last Out, Falling Guillotine, Eye Close SMG. You would now have a clear path to obtain them by participating in one of the core playlists of the game. I would still retain the feature to dump 20 tokens for a chance at anything in the world loot pool, even outside of the selection that Zavala has, and I would take it a step further. I would also add the ability to choose a weapon or choose an armor piece with 20 tokens, reminiscent of the ability to choose a weapon, armor, or chroma armor from Destiny 1's faction vendors, giving players a lot more agency in their loot chases. And then finally, I would have a single weapon per week with a unique roll for sale from Zavala for, say, a pretty high price, like say 100 Vanguard tokens, similar to the 97 legendary shards for Xur's Fated Engram. This would bring back the feel of Destiny 1 Year 3's Age of Triumph, where all the vendors on Weekly Reset all had the rolls on their weapons updated. However, with it being only a single weapon from Zavala per week, it wouldn't just be a gimme to get great rolls on all of his available weapons, and instead would be a nice weekly ritual to help spice up the Vanguard. In the long run, it is clear that Bungie needs to heavily reinvest and evolve the core playlists, including strikes. At current, it appears to me that Bungie's business strategy from the top level is that if an activity is free to play, then it cannot be directly monetized, and as such, they should spend next to no time on content. This philosophy is incredibly flawed though, as bringing in new players over time is crucial to keeping your game healthy. Joe Blackburn even mentioned this in his latest State of the Game address regarding rewards. I'll give a risque analogy. A drug dealer is inclined to give a prospective buyer a free one-time hit. The strategy is for the first-time buyer to get hooked on the product and then happily pay the dealer for more of the good stuff. The Destiny analogy, this would be season passes, expansions, Eververse, etc. Make new and returning players get a big dopamine hit from how fun Strikes and the other core playlists are, and they will happily become long-term paying customers. If Bungie doesn't change their strategy towards free-to-play and monetization, I don't think we can ever see any kind of long-form solutions be implemented for the playlist, so this is key. With that said, as Bungie is committed to infusion caps, aka sunsetting, for the long haul, it is unreasonable to expect a full suite of new weapons and armor from all the core playlists every single new expansion. So instead, each fall expansion, Bungie should add around 3 to 5 new weapons like Xenoclast, Stars and Shadow, Crowd Pleaser to each core playlists, which would include Strikes, which will then be good for the entire upcoming year. Then, in the 3 non-expansion seasons throughout the rest of the year, like how after Shadowkeep we had Season of Dawn, Season of the Worthy, and then Season of Arrivals, Bungie should implement 3 to 5 new weapons to one of the core playlists that you can target farm with tokens that would be an addendum to the selection of World Loot Pool items that you can farm from that respective vendor. So let's think ahead to the Witch Queen, which will be Season 16. Then, in Season 17, Zavala would get 3 to 5 new weapons to farm for with Vanguard tokens. In Season 18, Shax would get 3 to 5 new weapons to farm for with Crucible tokens, and in Season 19, the Drifter would get 3 to 5 new weapons to farm for. This would keep the game feeling fresh as time progresses and give each of the non-expansion seasons a subtle sub-theme. The winter is for the Vanguard, spring is for the Crucible, and summer is for Gambit. In addition, we should really have Bungie reintroduce Heroic Strikes as a playlist. This new Strike playlist would feature the return of Burns, aka 3x damage from a element instead of the 25% damage from singes that we have in the normal playlists, and even more new modifiers that increase difficulty but also allow for some crazy fun build synergies, like the Arc Burn, Airborne, Brawler, Paragon Greave combo we talked about earlier. Especially with our new combat mod slot giving easier access to Charge with Light and Warmind Cell builds, we have more build potential and synergy than ever before, Destiny 1 or Destiny 2. Bungie should leverage this and craft some of the newer Strike modifiers around these combat mods and really crank up the craziness. Now, this Heroic Strike playlist would absolutely still have matchmaking, and it would make it the competitive playlist of Strikes in a way, and it would grant increased rewards like 2x tokens, a chance of exotics, a Masterwork Prism chance, and I would also absolutely reintroduce Skeleton Keys. Now, with Skeleton Keys returning, completion of a Strike in the Heroic playlist would allow for a player to earn a roll of one of the Nightfall unique rewards from a chest that spawns after the boss is defeated. I would limit the ability to use these Skeleton Keys to the Heroic playlist and the Nightfall only, just in an attempt to slightly prolong the early chase for new rolls, the Nightfall specific loot. With this change to the playlist structure, additional loot, more fun build synergy, I think we could definitely have a bright future ahead for Strikes. As we wrap this all up, it is clear that Vanguard Strikes have been a storied part of Destiny's history and are currently at the lowest point they've ever been in the franchise. From static rolls in Destiny 2 Year 1, to Strike-specific loot only dropping in Nightfalls, to the outright removal of the Strike loot pool in favor of the World loot pool, as well as the removal of many Strikes into the Destiny content vault, the mode has never been worse. In the short term, though, we can begin turning this around, updating old Nightfall-specific loot with new power caps and random rolls and perk pools, juggling some of the Nightfall loot into new Strikes that remain in the game, introducing old Mercury heroic adventure modifiers to make the mode feel more fresh, and allowing for target farming of some of the World loot pool with Vanguard tokens would give both the Strike playlist and Nightfalls more purpose. And in the long term, a new Heroic Strike playlist with increased difficulty, fresh modifiers, and improved loot avenues, along with yearly updates to activity completion loot drops and additional target farming at Zavala and the other core playlist vendors would make Strikes a fan favorite playlist once again. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video was both informative and has you all thinking about your own ways that we can improve the Strike playlist. Feel free to drop a comment below explaining your ideas. Let me know what I can do better in the future when it comes to these videos. I've got some more awesome stuff in the oven for us all to talk about in the near future, so I hope to catch you all again soon. This has been your host, QJ. Cheers.